7 Pillars of Integral Education System. I have to get my dialogue correct.
Okay, cameras rolling. Camera set.
Meta.
Meta system.
Action anytime.
Good morning, Dr. EnRico Melson. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We were highly stimulated from the previous commentary you shared with us in regards to your views of the current status of education in the United States of America. Our viewers would like to ask you a question. I believe that we will have the opportunity to hear you today speak to us about the 7 pillars of integral education systems. Thank you very much, Dr. EnRico Melson. So if I can ask on behalf of the viewers today, can you please give us an overview of the 7 pillars of integral education systems? Thank you.
Thank you. We have systems of education that become pretty loosely defined. The 7 pillars of integral education is a meta system. Meta meaning beyond, meaning capping, meaning enveloping. A meta system, therefore, is that which takes other systems and brings them all together into a higher tier, so to speak, or a higher order of organization and integration. So the 7 pillars of integral education, as more appropriately termed a meta system, is something which began as a result of, first of all, my own personal journey as someone who came out of the impoverished segment of society in the United States and who was able to be afforded opportunities to succeed in the highest echelons of academia and scholastic circles. I'm very grateful for that. All along the way, however, while I was on the benefit end of things, I was always curious and quizzical and challenging myself as to what were the reasons why some would be favored and others, particularly the majority, would not. What were the formulations that constituted success in those environments? What were the kinds of aspects of that success formula or set of formulas that were primarily internal to a person's being, their well-being, their mindset, their emotional state, their culture? What were those aspects which were more what we might call external, environmental, collective, structure, the organization of delivery, etc. So I was always in this mode of questioning and synthesizing aspects of education or approaches to education, and I was given audience over 30 some years ago to voice some of my ideas and some of my opinions, and of course by some people who were relatively high in governmental positions at that time who deigned to listen to me and then give me encouraging feedback. Well, this was part of a good journey. Along the way, I was also gifted with certain assignments to develop systems of consciousness. Even when the primary impetus for such assignments would come from those who were in what we call the mind, body, spirit healing areas, such as Dr. Deepak Chopra, with whom I worked in the early and mid-90s for several years. Even though health and wellness and whole being and life enhancement might be the primary orientation of the directives nonetheless, they would keep coming to me as needing synthesis within the areas of education and the delivery systems of education. This was the background to the genesis of that which are called the 7 pillars of integral education. As we move forward into years, also approximately 5 years ago, I had a substantial, quite substantial engagement with the Professor Pedro Noguera, who happens to be an extended family member, highly regarded professor of educational psychology and sociology. He has been sought after by governments around the world, by major organizations and think tanks and all, and I owe a lot of my thought to Professor Pedro Noguera. Several years ago, he and I sat down and shared what he called the original 4 principles for establishing a new education system within the government and the country of Venezuela. He had shared this on a consultancy project with the government officials in Venezuela. Those were the first 4 of the 7 pillars. He and I had much further discussion about all of that a year to 2 later as we further elaborated on those 4 basic principles. I added 3 additional principles, the greater elaboration and the integration of those within the context of what we call integral operating systems, brought about this meta-system called the 7 pillars of integral education. I will list first just simply what they are, what each of those 7 pillars and categories happens to be, and then in subsequent, more in-depth discussion, be able to elaborate on each individually in a dedicated YouTube segment. The first of these 7 pillars is that which we call education of the whole person. That gives a lot of what seems to be fairly self-explanatory orientation. Yet when we really truly are talking about a whole being, we're talking in a far more expanded capacity than what we customarily and ordinarily, conventionally refer to as a whole person. And we will go into that. The second category, or the second pillar, is called education for empowerment. Empowerment is a very popular word, really began to come into its own in the late 70s and then flourished in the 80s as a commonplace usage word in areas of human and social services. It's still highly relevant throughout this world, still highly pertinent as part of the everyday conversation. However, it tends to have fallen out of favor a bit, certainly out of commonplace usage. So when we talk about education for empowerment, again, we are also speaking on the multiple levels of a person's being. The giving forth, the incipating, the engendering, the inspiring of a sense of power, personal power, collective power, power over forcefulness of being. And we also intend that that process of empowerment be something that is taught and that is experienced and that is essential for the entirety of a person's life. The third such pillar of the integral education meta-system is education for development. What is development? Well, here we're looking especially at the issue of the inner development and the outer development. The development of the individual, his trajectory of life. What education therefore has to encompass in order to facilitate and optimize that trajectory of a person's personal inner development. The other aspect of that is what we may call the more external and the more collective development. What are the societal needs for the educational system? And is that educational system in step with, in tune with, and in fact serving to lead in the further development of the society itself and the education addressing what is the nature of the balance and the harmony of an individual with the collective of society, and the collective of the society with that of the planetary ecosystem. This is all aspects of education for development. The fourth pillar is called education for global citizenship. And of course, naturally, it has much overlap with that of the education for development, and particularly in what we call the external and the collective. We have become a globalized society. We have become a society that recognizes that our responsibilities are not only to ourselves, to our families, our communities, our national borders. Our responsibilities now to the entirety of the planet, the ecosystem of the planet, and indeed the evolution of society itself. So education for global citizenship is another essential principle and pillar of this meta system. These were the first four original, and as I said, Professor Noguera and I further elaborated these, and then came the addition of the next three. Number 5, pillar number 5, is education for genius. Genius education is actually an elaboration of a system, a means and a methodology by which we can tap this innate, intrinsic genius capacity that is literally the natural organization of sentient beings, of human beings, to know that we are of genius. We are all of genius. Therefore, our education system must begin with that premise, to develop and educate us to tap our field of genius. And this is the 5th pillar. The 6th pillar is that which is called education for enlightenment. This might raise an eyebrow or two. It is not simply the enlightenment constructs that we speak of in many of the Eastern traditional contexts. It is a more diffuse approach as well to awakening, to the enlightenment to global responsibility, to the enlightenment of the knowledge that is endogenous and engenderable within our being, as well as our connection with all of that which we have perceived as beyond ourselves, all the way to the cosmos itself. Yes, even cosmology and the education on the cosmos, the education on creation, on science and spirituality, and the harmonization of all of that. This is essential. This is the education for enlightenment, our ability and our need to awaken individually and societally. The final such pillar, the 7th pillar, is that which we refer to as education for service. Service is indeed one of the most important dimensions of life and activity that we must pursue, and into which we must immerse ourselves personally, collectively, societally. Service is the means by which all other economic systems are themselves based and able to be elaborated and proliferate, which means therefore that there is a giving process that actually transcends that of the transactional process of currency, economic systems, government systems, and all other sectors of society. All sectors of human activity and ecosystem interchange require a form of service. So we will teach much more about this construct of service, particularly what we call selfless service. These are the 7 pillars of integral education. This means a radical transformation, radical overhaul, an evolution, a revolution in the approach to education itself, not simply in the United States and the Western world, globally as well. This is indeed what is necessary and what is essential in order to bring about a way and a state of realization of self as whole, as fulfilling that which has been gifted us by Creator, by Spirit, by nature, by the cosmos, that which has been at times derailed by many of the machinations of society. It is time that we also revolutionize the system of delivery, and thus the infrastructural systems, the matrices into which we infuse this process called learning and education, so that we can accelerate and lead forth our human family, our planetary family, to a level of harmony that will also allow us to bring about accelerated solutions, because certainly we've done quite a lot and way too much in terms of creating planetary scale problems, societal conflicts, and very, very unnecessary and excessive suffering for all sentient life here on our planet. This is the foundational approach. This is the manifesto, so to speak, for what we call this meta system of the 7 pillars of integral education. Again, I hope this is useful.
Thank you, Dr. EnRico Melson, once again for enlightening and providing service to us with the genius that you carry and the example as a global citizen, and allowing us to develop, to empower the whole person within us. Thank you very much, Dr. EnRico Melson.
Thank you.